I ordered Leaf to hold the eastern wind, and Stormbreaker leaned toward Ash Barrow with Gullhaven's departure bell fading behind us. The birch bark lay open on the steering bench. 11 living hostages. My name cut beneath theirs in strokes deep enough to split the inner skin. Come before the third sunset, or the living will be taught to stay dead. The eastern horizon had already swallowed half the first day. My right arm still hung badly from hammercast. Colin bound it against my chest, then caught Astrid trying to tighten her own shield strap with teeth in one hand. He made us sit together while the others worked around us. Orm kept away from the humming prow. Leaf steered with his swollen ankle planted wide. No one aboard had brought an unwounded body from Gullhaven. 13 of us chased 11 names. 12 had chosen the voyage. Faye Anvildaughter guided under the paid sentence she had chosen instead of Gullhaven's guarded forge. Dalla carried speech, not Faye's bonds. Astrid commanded her contracted shields. Leaf held the steering oar. Those differences showed whenever one of them told me no. The birch demand and the third sunset left no softer work, reach every hostage still breathing, and learn whose hand moved the broken chains. The saga waited at level 3, renown 0 of 16, with Thor favor 3 and Odin favor 1. Storm strength and rune sight still filled my 2 slots, hammercast and narrow focus refined them. The numbers offered nothing for my shoulder. Distance? I asked. Faye crouched by the prow with her unbound hand spread beside the lowest route groove. By deep road, half day. By your coast, until tomorrow's middle light if wind holds. Barrow path begins at a split ash. Do not follow black stones if they shine. Dalla stood across from her, copper earring tapping her cheek as the deck rolled. That warning belongs to Faye's road craft, not all MYRK custom. Shining stone can mean spring water in western tunnels. Here it may mean a grave path dressed to mislead. I will translate speech. She will choose ground. Do not make one task into the other because our eyes look alike to you. I had planned to make Johnny translate, I said. Johnny held up his bandaged 3-fingered hand. Every dead king speaks fluent or. Dalla did not smile. Faye did, briefly. Distinct work did not require affection. Solvig read the names on the bark because she knew coast families better than any of us. The first was Yrsa Kettlesdottir, her younger sister, a dyer who lived near the Ash Ridge. Solvig's thumb stayed on the cut until the nail whitened. The others were Hild and her son Ollie from the smokehouse, Marta the beekeeper, brothers Canute and Orrin, both charcoal burners, old Finn who kept boundary stones, runer of the reeds, no kin of my mother, a shepherd named Guy, Asa Littletooth, a girl of 14, and Torvald, the runner whose brother had died carrying the message to Gullhaven. They were taken over 3 nights, Solvig said. Those farms quarrel over pasture, salt, and which priest lies most sweetly. They do not gather for one lord. Someone chose witnesses from separate households. A court wants testimony, Leaf said. Or wants mouths to accuse me, I answered. Astrid had Ingrid spread shields near the mast. She tried one hard bind, hissed, and moved Ingrid to center without excuse. Angel checked sling stones. Orm reached for his spear, but the prow hummed and his knees softened. Colin sent him aft. Nobody enters a mound because Eirik smiles at a door, she said. If he smiles twice, bind his ankles. A captain's jealousy is ugly. So is your face. We endure. Bera had begun with 130 person days of food. She cut 13 from the tally for our first day, shoved the 13th bread heel into Vay's hand, and watched until the guide swallowed. A starving guide takes the shortest road into a hole, Bera said. We are paying for the road around it. Toby crawled under the prow brace when the hull lifted, tapped the inner key, and chalked one new hairline beside the old mark. He told Leaf to ease the sail. Leaf did. The ship found its pace without a second roll call. The birch strip smelled faintly of sour ash. Dalla held it to side light and found grey paste rubbed into the cuts. Faye touched none of it. She asked for a fishbone needle, lifted one grain, and dropped it into vinegar. The grain hissed blue. Barrow salt, she said. Dead caught seal. Can it track us? Astrid asked. Dalla answered first. I do not know. Faye answered second. Assume yes. A black sail showed behind us before noon. It rose from Gullhaven's western haze, low and narrow, keeping outside bowshot. Then a second dark shape appeared between us and shore. Scala had not waited for Law to finish with her prisoners. Hostile pursuit had entered the immediate sea. The third sunset did not move closer because I was wounded. It only became more expensive. The black sails did not attack at once. They herded. One skiff held our seaward quarter while the other used the coast to keep us from turning north. They were lighter than Stormbreaker and carried 6 or 7 oars each. Green cords ran along their gunnels. No banner named them, but they recognized the low-hide screen Scala's cutters used against sling stones. She has more hands than escaped Gullhaven, they said. Buyers joined her. Dalla translated the distant shouts only when wind carried whole phrases. They call you Oathbreaker. They say the Dead Court has accepted a claim. They want us to continue east. Then why follow? Leaf asked. To make certain we do not rest, turn, or gather coast fighters, Astrid said. The black sails answered the gift rules better than any lecture. Swapping divine channels took several nauseating minutes, made me spiritually visible, and required no armed pursuit in the immediate area. Scala kept both skiffs close enough to deny that. Frasier came anyway. She did not stand on deck. Her voice moved through the foam beside our wake, warm as blood under winter wool. For one blink I smelled summer earth and crushed flowers instead of salt. A woman's shadow ran beneath the water with hair spread like a net. The dead at Ash Barrow are loud, she said. I can let you hear which hunger holds them and which grief still chooses. Spirit sense opened before my inner sight as an offered path. It could perceive nearby dead, magical hunger, and emotional traces. Every look would also let spirits and spirit-hunting predators locate me. A crowded grave could overwhelm truth with grief. False spirits, bait, and silence wards could mislead it. The offer required an equipped slot. No, I said. Several people looked at me. I told them who had spoken and every condition I understood. The foam woman laughed without kindness. Cast out the raven, then. He has eaten enough of your home. Runesight had taken my mother's mending song, blurred the edges of Sigrid's remembered face, and stolen the sound of Hava's laugh. Odin's path was cruel knowledge. Yet we were approaching visible bindings made by an enemy who used decoys. Abandoning it blindly for an unseen sense would trade one uncertainty for another. More plainly, I could not swap while Scala pursued. Need did not create rest. Both slots stay filled, I said. Storm strength and rune sight. Frasier's path is offered, not carried. No third gift, and no swap while those skiffs herd us. The shadow rolled beneath us. Your careful rules will sound thin when 11 voices call from earth. Then help without owning my blood. She vanished. No favor appeared. No gift entered me. The wake smelled of fish again. Orm had heard none of the words, but his burned scalp tightened as the shadow passed. Something looked back, he whispered. That was warning enough. Colin moved him away from the prow. Frasier's offer had not been harmless merely because I refused it. Scala's seaward skiff advanced. A clay bolt struck our wake, burst, and spread a skin of black oil. Flame followed from a second bolt. The fire raced over water toward Stormbreaker's stern. Enemy hands had escalated first. Oil fire aft. Jarni barked. Leaf did not wait for me. He called the bow 2 points shoreward, taking us across the wind before the burning patch reached the steering oar. Sheet. Jarni ordered the sail eased. Solvik freed the forward sheet without letting it snarl around Tovi, then kicked a wet cloak over a spark that jumped the rail. The turn exposed our side to the coastal skiff, and 3 bolts came over the rail. One buried itself in the mast. One split against Ingrid's shield. The third struck a water barrel wedge. Bera knocked the bolt away with her ladle and lay across the cask as if the next missile would need to argue with her first. Astrid's company formed without crowding the wounded captain into center. Ingrid held the broad shield. Orm guarded low. Engel slung from behind the mast and struck the coastal skiff's hide screen, not because leather deserved punishment but because he had seen an oar blade move behind it. The stone punched through and broke the rower's rhythm. I could not throw hard. I could still judge lines. I used my left hand to cast a light fishing weight attached to Solvik's thin cord. It fell short of the seaward skiff by 2 spear lengths. Excellent, Astrid said. The sea has surrendered. I was measuring. Measure farther. The next cast went beyond their bow. Solvik hauled as the cord crossed 2 oars. It was too light to trap them, but the rowers lifted to avoid fouling. 3 lost strokes gave Leaf room to complete the turn. Mortal rope bought what thunder did not. Scala's people answered with barbed lines aimed at our rig. One caught the repaired rail. Tovi shouted before anyone cut it. Load outward. Brace will take it. Do not pull forward. Jarni obeyed the carpenter rather than pride. He led the enemy cord around a stern pin and hauled sideways on Tovy's count. The hook tore free from their shaft instead of our rail. Solvig kept it. Practical iron changed owners without a song. The chase lasted until grey afternoon. We could not outrun both skiffs in open water. Leif used shoals Vey named from cliff color. Dalla did not pretend to guide, she repeated Vey's depth calls in Norse and challenged one when the word could mean either submerged shelf or shadowed shelf. Vey corrected it by pointing to gulls standing where water looked deep. Stormbreaker crossed with a handspan beneath the steering blade. The lighter skiffs crossed too. Pursuit remained close. Depth. Leif called. Knee of the gull, Vey answered, pointing to birds standing on a shelf the eye wanted to call deep. Then 3 or lengths of true water. Then a tooth. Dalla repeated the call and stopped mid-phrase. Tooth or fang. In Western speech fang is a rock that bites keel. Tooth is a rock that only scrapes. Fang, Vey said after a breath. I chose the wrong Norse. Leif eased half a point. The steering blade kissed stone hard enough for Tovy to curse from the brace, then cleared. Behind us one skiff scraped, lost an oar, and fell a ship's length. The other cut outside and kept the pressure. Again, Astrid said. By us one length at a time. We prepared for the mound while moving. Bera and Tovy fitted 3 clay pots with damp straw, rotten sail fiber, juniper, and a little lamp oil. They were smoke, not magic. Too much oil would burn captives. Too little would die under damp earth. Solvig braided drag loops that could pull ankles without tightening around throats. Colin packed vinegar cloth for lungs and honey cloth for wounds. Ingel selected blunt stones for hands and sharp stones for things without living blood. Astrid drilled a 7-body passage formation using deck benches as a tunnel, Ingrid center shield, Orm low left, Astrid calling from the second rank, me on the free side, Colin behind, with Dalla and Vey never placed as interchangeable fighters. They would guide the mound's paths. Dalla would carry offers and testimony across languages. Either could refuse the other's task. Both did. I do not speak dead law, Vey said. I do not crawl first into a hole you remember from a grandmother's warning, Dalla answered. Good, Astrid said. At last, specialists. Leif asked what Barrow law meant. Vey explained that some coast mounds held courts because the dead remembered boundary bargains longer than living jarls. Families left names, salt, and disputes at outer stones. Most answers came through dreams, chants, or a keeper's interpretation. Ash Barrow had become different after Skadi's buyers arrived. The dead walked. They seized witnesses. They claimed challenge right over living blood. Invented right? Leif asked. All right is invented, Dalla said. The useful question is who accepts it, who can refuse, and what follows. The black sails closed again at dusk. Frasier did not repeat her offer. 11 names did that work for her. We ate at stations. Bera deducted 13 person days in full this time. Water remained 4 sound barrels and 11 full skins after we opened one for the chase and wound cleaning. The Mercy skin stayed sealed. No barrel had cracked. The prow strap held, though Tovy found the inner brace had moved the width of a fish scale under the enemy hook. He drove no new peg while the hull flexed. He marked it and ordered reduced sail near shore. At sunset a fire appeared ahead beneath a lone ash tree. 11 figures stood around it with hands bound before them. Solvig found Yrsa by the way she leaned on her left leg. That is her left knee after the dive at fall. No corpse copies a sister's limp that well. Jani lifted a hand to shade the light. Or they studied her before they took her. Then they still have her living to study, Solvig snapped. I will not invent her death from a safe deck. I ordered no horn and no cheer. Leif kept us outside sling range of the shore stones. The figures turned their heads together as if one cord ran through every neck. Then they walked into the mound one by one, and the fire went thin without dying. A tall dead man in a bronze mask remained outside. He raised a spear toward our sail. Behind him a second fire winked once from the false cove Vey had refused. Signal to Scala, Vey said. They want you angry enough to beach. I am angry enough, I said. I am not stupid enough. The first sunset was gone. We could not land beneath the ash. Vey refused the obvious cove before Leif turned toward it. Shining stones, she said. Moonlight glazed a black path through shallow water. It looked smooth enough to beach a hull. Tovy dropped a lead line and found no bottom where the stones promised one. Dalla held the birch message beside the shore and saw the same grey paste glittering between rocks. The path was a false surface laid over a cut channel. A grounded ship would roll broadside, break the repaired strakes, and leave Scala's skiffs at our stern. No rune was needed. A guide saw the lie because she knew where water should break. They led us half a mile south to a reed creek hidden by 2 leaning pines. Stormbreaker could not enter. Leaf anchored beyond its mouth with Jarni, Tovi, Bera, and injured Orm aboard. Astrid hated leaving a shield hand, but Orm's scalp had begun to pulse in time with the mound fire. Colin judged him unable to enter Earth. Astrid accepted the healer's authority. The shore party was 8, Astrid, Ingrid, Ingel, Colin, Solvig, Dalla, Faye, and me. We carried 3 smoke pots, shields, 2 spears, Ingel's sling, my knife, a light hammer, 2 crowbars, wooden wedges, coils, vinegar cloth, a small water skin, honey bandages, a shuttered lamp, and the birch message. No one carried more than a wounded body could run with. Leaf remained steering master, not a boy left behind. If the skiffs attack, I keep the ship afloat, he said. If your second dawn passes without a signal, I move north around the headland and show the Grey Company strip. I do not enter their false cove. Astrid approved. Solvig gave Bjarni a line code. 1 lantern at the ash meant found, 2 meant hostages moving, 3 fast meant enemy at our backs, a lantern swung low meant launch the reed boat. Separate commands needed agreed signs, not faith that my voice crossed stone. We went ashore in the small boat. Scala's sails lingered beyond Stormbreaker, close enough to prevent rest and far enough to make Leaf choose every turn. Pursuit had not ended because my feet touched soil. The first house stood empty with its door tied open by grey cord. Ash lay over the hearth. Not cold ash. Someone had sifted it after the fire died and drawn a broken circle. They examined the knot. Surface cord. Cave twist copied badly. Dalla found a tally stick beneath the sleeping bench. 11 fresh cuts on one side, 6 old attack marks on the other. A hostage count made by someone who knew farm tools. Not work and a farm tally stick. Hands had been here, not a banner. At the second farm we found living people hiding under a fish floor, Torvald's wife Sailor, 2 old men, and a boy with a burn along one cheek. Ingrid lowered her weapon before pulling the hatch. Colin treated the boy. Solvig named herself and Yersa. Fear loosened enough for testimony. The bronze-masked dead had come first, 3 nights earlier, walking from the mound at moonrise. They took Marta and Old Finn but killed no one. The next night armed living men arrived with Scala. Those men selected the remaining households, asked which people settled disputes, and took 9 more. They burned 1 storehouse only after Torvald's brother fled toward Gullhaven. The runner reached the road. A knife party followed. Did MYRK people take them? Sailor asked Dalla, not me. Some attackers were Scala's cutters, Dalla said. They boarded with that faction and left it. I trade from Gullhaven. Neither fact makes every MYRK hand one will. Tell me marks, voices, clothing, and chosen acts. Sailor described 2 short fighters in stone-sewn mail, 3 coast men with seal cloaks, and a tall man whose face remained covered. She heard Scala's name once. She heard another name spoken with fear, Skadi. The tall man carried a chain of pale links around one forearm. When he touched the barrow stone, the bronze-masked dead bowed. Chain taker, they said. The boy interrupted. There was a lord too. He drew a bronze seal shape in ash. Leaf's family mark. My mouth went dry before anyone spoke Earl Sten's name. Sailor had seen a broad, bearded man in a torn blue cloak beside Skadi. Alive, wounded at the temple, walking without bonds. He argued when the hostages were taken. He did not stop it. At dawn he rode north with Skadi, then returned to the mound before the second night. That was evidence, not judgment. A seal, a cloak, a broad man. Sten had been missing since our mast broke. The boy could have seen another household mark. Skadi could have dressed a captive for us to recognize. I held all those doubts because certainty wanted to hurt Leaf before he even heard. Astrid watched me choose silence. We tell him when we have more than ash drawing. We tell him before others use it against him. Both can be true. Sailor gave us the 11 captives condition at last sight. Yersa limped but could walk. Ollie had fever from a cut. Finn needed a staff. Runa of the Reeds was 6 months pregnant. Guy had a broken thumb. The rest were unwounded when taken. Every defensible hostage alive meant our plan had to carry fever, age, pregnancy, and panic through a pursued coast. A challenge won without transport would be vanity. We changed the plan. Colin prepared 2 drag litters from doors and rope. Ingrid showed sailors people how to brace them. 3 villagers volunteered to carry, including the burned boy's mother. Astrid did not command them. She named the risk, walking dead, armed cutters, smoke, and possible pursuit. They repeated it and chose. Sailor refused to hide. They chose our witnesses so each house would obey alone. We go together. The burned boy's mother knotted a litter strap twice and tested her own weight on it. If the dead walk, they walk into names, she said. Not into empty yards. That choice put feet under the testimony Skadi had tried to keep scattered. At the 3rd house, an old barrow keeper named Edda waited beside a salt bowl. She had not been taken because the dead still recognized her office. Her left ear was gone, cut fresh. Scala wanted the entry words, Edda said. I gave her the old ones. She cut me because the old words did not command. They were never commands. They were a request to be heard. She taught Dalla the form, and Dalla repeated it without claiming the custom belonged to her. A petitioner stood outside the East Stone, named the dispute, offered salt freely, and asked the dead court to hear living witnesses. No weapon could cross the first threshold until the court accepted challenge. If either side attacked before judgment, that side abandoned its claim under the old bargain. Will the dead obey? I asked. Before Skadi, some did. Now a pale chain passes through the court seat. They obey it and pretend obedience is law. Can we break the chain? Perhaps. But the hostages sit between its links. Pull wrongly and their breath stops. Edda had seen the visible binding at the East Stone. A circle of ash runes connected the court seat to 11 name pegs. Skadi displayed it openly and told her any broken peg killed the named hostage. He wanted a runeseer to look. That warning should have stopped me later. We sent Sailor to Stormbreaker with the ash drawing of Sten's seal, the hostage conditions, and our amended signal. She would tell Leaf herself, as witness, not carry my conclusion. The other volunteers waited with litters in the reed hollow. Near midnight we reached the split ash. 1 trunk lived and 1 had been burned hollow. They ignored the black stones shining north and crawled through fern to a goat path west. Dalla stayed behind her and repeated every route call. At one fork they chose a low tunnel. Dalla smelled grave mold and refused. They argued in whispers. They scraped the floor and exposed fresh boot pressure leading in. Dalla held the lamp low and found no return prints. A baited route. They accepted the correction. Interpreter can smell. Guide can learn. We took the high ledge. Below, for dead sentries watched the false tunnel exit with rusted spears. Iron spikes stood from their backs, and for one foolish bit they looked like rolls-bound men. Do not touch the nails, Edda had warned. Those are burial pins. Pulling them opens the spine and frees nothing. Rold's local rule had ended on his island. The dead at Ash Barrow could not be defeated by repeating it. Beyond the sentries, 11 living voices began to name themselves in the dark. The East Stone stood taller than a man, split down its center by roots. We reached it before dawn with the dead sentries below and Scala's skiffs still showing signal fire on the sea. Dalla set Edda's salt bowl on flat earth. She did not pretend an invented phrase was ancient truth beyond this coast. She spoke exactly what the keeper had testified. Living households ask hearing. 11 named people are held. Eirik Halvorsen answers the demand made upon him. Witnesses stand outside freely. Let claim be named before blood. She poured salt. The bronze-masked dead came up the hill without breathing. 5 carried spears. 2 wore rotted mail. None had Rold's copper nails. Iron burial pins passed through shoulder or spine, but ash cords ran from their wrists toward the mound. Plain eyes could see the cords only when dawn made them silver. I held weapons down. The tallest stopped beyond reach. The named thrower enters. Others remain forfeit if iron crosses. Dalla translated the older words beneath his grave-thick Norse. They listened for chain commands hidden in the sounds. Their work touched but did not merge. What claim? I asked. Rold Saltburied held the first threshold. You broke crown and storm stake. The chain opened. Dead below lost boundary. The court claims your living heat until balance returns. That was a charge, not proof. Who placed the pale chain through your seat? The dead man struck his spear but the ash cords tightened. Enter and hear. Astrid stepped beside me. He enters with shield witness and interpreter. Old challenge permits both. The mask turned toward Dalla. She repeated Edda's wording that a petitioner could bring one law voice and one body witness when death was the possible judgment. The sentries stood silent long enough for roots to creak. Accepted, the dead man said. Astrid chose Ingrid as body witness because her own arm could not hold center. She remained outside to command extraction. Dalla entered as law voice. I entered as named petitioner. They would guide the outer paths and listen for MYRK commands from Skadi's people. Solvik stayed with her smoke pots, ropes, and the only personal knowledge of Yrsa's habits. Colin waited nearest the hostage passage. The threshold opened as a slab rolled inward. Cold came out carrying 11 warm breaths. Somewhere inside a child coughed and tried to stop himself. A woman whispered a boundary prayer that had nothing of Skadi in it. Finn's staff tapped stone in account of safe floor. Keep the salt where eyes can see it, Dalla told Ingrid. If they force us to move, the bowl moves first. Ingrid nodded once and shifted her shield so the salt rode in the hollow of her elbow. Astrid's last word from outside was not luck. If the floor drops, shout the count. We haul on voices, not hope. I stepped through. I saw the false chain at once. Ash runes circled the first chamber, each clean and visible in lamp glow. 11 wooden pegs stood along the wall with names cut into them. Pale lines ran from every peg through an iron ring beneath the court seat. One line pulsed when a hostage coughed beyond the wall. It was exactly the binding Edda had described and exactly the threat Skadi wanted me to see. Narrow focus offered one weapon, wound, rune, or binding. I chose the visible ring. Rune sight opened. Blue fire drew every ash line sharp. The iron ring shone as anchor. 11 name pegs fed it. A break mark showed where a hammer could split the circle. The answer was beautiful, immediate, and wrong. I knew it was wrong one heartbeat too late. The lines were too willing to be read. Their brightness flattened every scratch beneath them. A second mirrored binding reflected from polished mica mixed into the ash, making a visible surface pretend to be depth. Narrow focus reduced the field, it did not make a decoy honest. Rune sight revealed enchantment lines I could actually see. It did not tell me which history to trust, what Skadi intended, or whether an unseen anchor waited behind stone. I shut it without striking. The price had already entered my father's hands. I remembered Harva teaching me to splice a wet net beside our door. I remembered his patience, the smell of tar, and my own clumsy anger. I knew his hands had guided mine. Their details vanished. I could no longer see the split left thumbnail, the white hook scar across his palm, or the way 2 fingers bent after winter hauling. In memory, my father's hands became blurred shapes at the ends of familiar sleeves. I stared at my own fingers as if they had stolen them. Cost? Ingrid asked. His hands, I said. I know what they did. I cannot see them. Dalla touched neither me nor the ring. And the answer? Visible. Misleading. I saw lines, not truth. The break mark is bait. We do not strike it. A laugh came from deeper in the mound. Not dead. Living. Scala stepped onto a ledge above the court passage with 3 cutters and 2 coast bowmen. She had used the pursuit to deny rest and drive us to the entrance she prepared. The white stripe across her soot mask made a grin of its own. Runita looked, Dalla translated. Scala pulled a green cord. The false break mark collapsed inward. A stone blade swept across the place my head would have occupied if I had knelt to hammer it. At the same moment all 11 pegs flared, but no hostage cried out. The display threatened them without controlling their lives. My wasted flash had proved one useful negative by refusing the final bait. The obvious circle was not their killing bond. It was still a waste because plain suspicion and Edda's warning should have kept Odin closed. I had paid Harva's hands to learn that Skadi knew how I paid. Scala's bowman loosed. Enemy action broke the hearing first. Ingrid raised her shield. 1 arrow struck hide. Dalla dropped behind the court stone and shouted, in both tongues, attack before judgment abandons claim. Witness it. The bronze-masked dead turned their spears, not toward Scala, but toward everyone living. The pale chain around the court seat pulsed from somewhere beyond the visible wall. Compelled law and old law tore against each other. Outside, Astrid heard Dalla's cry. Smoke began to pour through the goat vents. The court had accepted our challenge. Scala had broken truce. 11 hostages were still breathing. Then Earl walked into the blue edge left by my dying sight. He stood beside a tall man wrapped in pale chain, alive and unbound. Earl looked older than the sea had any right to make him in a few weeks. A healing cut divided his brow. His blue cloak had been patched with pale hide, and one boot was MYRK work while the other remained his own. He wore no mail. A sword hung at his side. No rope held his wrists. The bronze seal at his throat matched the shape Sailor's Boy had drawn in Ash, and the seal leaf carried aboard Stormbreaker. Beside him stood Skadi Chaintaker. He was mortal. That surprised me more than Horns would have. Tall, spare, perhaps 40, with wind-dark skin and grey braided through black hair. Pale link circled his left forearm and crossed his chest like a lord's chain. They were not metal, I knew. Each link held a moving mark, and the marks turned away when I tried to follow them with plain sight. His right hand carried an ash staff capped by a broken iron ring. I saw the enchantment directly. I did not open rune sight again. Skadi smiled at the choice. Odin has taught his price well. Sten's gaze fixed on me. Where is my son? Alive, I nearly said. Steering your lost ship. Voting with shares you do not own. Instead I kept the hearing narrow. Outside your reach until the hostages leave. Pain hardened his face. You command him now? No? That answer disturbed him more than yes. Dalla rose behind the court stone. She named herself as interpreter and law voice, then demanded Skadi state standing. He answered in Norse, but she repeated every word Sove, and the MYRK listeners in outer passages could hear the same claim. I stand as keeper of the severed roads, Skadi said. Rold guarded the first chain badly. Eirik broke what remained. Ash Court demands balance. I provided a stronger bond so the dead would not wander into every bed between here and Split Harbor. You provided hostages, Dalla said. The court selected witnesses. A woman's voice called from behind the wall. Liar. Your knife men chose us. Solvig shouted Yersa's name from the vents. The answer came twice, furious and alive. Name the knife men, Yersa called. Name the knights. Do not let him speak for our mouths. Behind the wall, Marta and Finn took up the demand until Stone carried 11 overlapping voices. Someone, Asa by the pitch, banged a clay cup against rock in time with the names. Canute cursed a chord that would not give. Runa told Ollie to put his face to the crack for cleaner air. They were already building a record while Skadi tried to build a spectacle. Skadi tapped his staff. The pale chain tightened. The woman beyond the wall choked into silence, then forced one more word through it, witness. Sten flinched. He did not draw his sword or step away. Release them, I said. I am here. That was the invitation, not the bargain. Skadi studied me as a trader might study a boat whose owner did not know its value. You were poor before the storm. Your father bent to a landlord. Your mother mended other men's nets. A boy with no land learned to hate rank, learned to throw because iron was too dear, learned to climb because the deck below belonged to someone else. Then gods found him exactly shaped for refusal. Do you think poverty that useful grew by chance? He spoke with certainty and offered no evidence. The gods engineered your want, he continued. They bred a useful king from hunger. Odin took your memories to hollow a throne. Thor filled the space with force. They need a mortal who will call chains freedom while fastening the last one for them. The claim struck because it used true wounds. Hava did bend to a landlord. Runa did mend for households richer than ours. Odin had taken pieces of them. None of that proved a god arranged our rent, my birth, or a winter catch. Rune sight could not reveal intent or history. Skadi's moving links did not make his story objective truth. You know what gods want? I asked. I know what they paid. That is another claim. Bring testimony. Dalla repeated it in the court form. Skadi's smile thinned. Sten spoke before him. I saw the storm choose you. Men followed you before the mast fell. My son looked at you when he should have looked at me. If gods did not breed it, you seized it quickly enough. There was the wound beneath his survival. Leaf kept us alive on ice, I said. He steers by contract. Your family holds 25 shares under Gullhaven judgment, controlled by him until your fate is known. He also owns earned shares separate from the family block. If you want truth about your ship, hear all of it. My ship. The one you lost broke. Rolls was captured, cleansed, repaired, divided, and renamed Stormbreaker. No person owns another person's service aboard her. The dead stirred at the word divided. Old Finn called from beyond the wall, shares witnessed. At Gullhaven, Dalla answered. Named clerks and fishers. Debt terms. Leaf would have liked him. Dalla described the extinguished cost reserve, the family loan, and the absence of bodies as collateral in 3 compact sentences. The hostages began asking questions through cracks: who pledged silver, whether workers consented, whether Sten lived, why the court held them. Their testimony turned the chamber away from the spectacle Skadi had built. Skadi struck his staff harder. The pale link under the court seat flared. Bronze-masked sentries forced their spear points toward us. Some fought the motion. One drove his own spear into the floor to keep its point from Ingrid's throat. Another twisted until an old shoulder broke rather than stabbed Dalla. The chain punished choice without erasing it. Earl Sten saw that too. Enough, he told Skadi. You asked me to recover your son and command, Skadi said quietly. I did not ask for farm women strangled under stone. A king learns which price serves the larger rescue. Sten's hand closed on his sword hilt, but he still did not draw. Fear, debt, hope, or ambition held him beside the man who had saved him. I could not see which. Standing there alive proved only that he still stood there. His next act would have to answer the rest. Dalla demanded the chain claim be judged under Barrow law. Skadi answered by naming a champion. A stone door opened behind the court seat. Something enormous crawled through sideways. He had once been a man. Ash packed the split flesh of his face. Bronze plates covered ribs and thighs, tied with burial cord through dead muscle. Both hands held a long iron maul whose head was a grave door hinge. No rolled nail marked him. Pale chain ran through a ring in his breastbone and back into darkness. Harm Ashmouth, old Finn whispered. First keeper. Edda had said a court challenge could transfer a disputed claim if the claimant's champion was defeated before witnesses. Skadi used the rule because he believed his bound champion could not lose. If I won, every named pledge had to leave alive before the court heard another claim. If I fell or yielded, my living heat entered the pale chain and the 11 remained until balance was declared. He cannot feel pain, Skadi said. He does not tire. Your thunder has one shoulder left. Then he has the advantage in beauty. Astrid's voice came through a vent. That was one smile. Harm lifted the maul and struck the court stone before I accepted. The floor split. Shards cut Ingrid's cheek. Dalla fell. A grave passage opened beneath the hostages, and their chamber began filling with cold smoke. The enemy had escalated again. Challenge had become rescue whether I accepted or not. I accept under the witnessed condition, I shouted. All 11 leave alive if Harm is defeated. The bronze mask turned. Heard. From beyond the wall, 11 voices answered one by one. Sten said nothing. Skadi said, begin. Harm did not wait for me to bow. The maul crossed the chamber at head height. Ingrid caught only the shaft against her shield rim, enough to bend its path above Dalla. The impact split rawhide and threw Ingrid against the wall. The champion reversed with no pause. His backswing struck the court seat and sent the visible ash circle spinning into the air. The false binding vanished like flour under a boot. No hostage died. I went low, right arm bound, light hammer in my left hand. Might made my ordinary body stronger than it had been before Gullhaven, but gradually gained strength did not teach my left hand a warrior's skill. I struck Harm's knee plate because it was large. The hammer rang and nearly escaped my fingers. He kicked me across the threshold. Toughness kept the shock from emptying my lungs entirely. It did not turn ribs to oak. I rolled outside while his maul crushed the stone where my hips had been. Passage rule, Astrid called. Do not circle him. Make him turn. Her plan, not mine. Ingrid regained her feet and held the narrow side of the chamber. She was witness, not my second champion, so she could block attacks on Dalla and herself but not strike Harm for me without risking the judgment. Dalla dragged the salt bowl behind cover and kept speaking conditions aloud so the dead court could not pretend confusion. Outside, Solvig lit the first smoke pot. Damp straw and juniper rolled white through the goat vents. The smoke did not expose spirits or solve enchantment. It showed air. One stream bent downward through the hostage wall, then vanished into a floor crack beneath Skadi's seat. A second flowed around the champion's breast ring and drew toward the same crack. The true working needed breath moving through hidden passages. They saw it from the upper path. Lower vent, she shouted. Chain draft goes under. Dalla translated her root terms. She did not alter them into a law claim. Scala sent cutters to stop Solvig. Injal's first sling stone broke a knife hand. His second struck a smoke pot and nearly ruined our own screen. Solvig kicked the cracked pot into the vent, accepted the burn on her boot, and hauled a prepared green hook line. The hook Scala had fired at Stormbreaker's rail now caught the ankle of a coast bowman climbing toward her. She dragged him off balance. Colin pulled him clear of the drop and bound the weapon hand instead of letting him fall to death. Astrid held the outer path with her wounded arm strapped close. She used voice and feet, not a hard shield bind. Ingrid stays. Ingel high. Colin between litters and blood. They calls stone. Dalla calls words. Nobody trades places because Eirik is losing. I was losing. Harm drove me backward along the narrow threshold. His maul could not be parried by my light hammer. I used speed to change footing before each blow, but the grave floor rolled with loose bones and ash. He did not tire. He did not protect his face. A cut meant nothing. His burial plates overlapped so spear or knife could not reach the pale ring easily. I tested the iron pin through his left shoulder with a hammer tap during one slow recovery. The dead flesh shifted. Nothing released. Harm's elbow came down and opened the skin above my eye. Rold's nails had taught me a local answer. Repeating it here would only dismantle armor while the champion remained bound and fighting. The hostages acted inside their chamber. Yrsa recognized Solveig's smoke by juniper. She shouted the wall count between coughs. Old Finn used his boundary staff to sound floor stones. Asa Littletooth wriggled one hand free because her wrists were smaller than the loop cut for her. She passed Colin's vinegar cloth, pushed through a vent, from Ollie to pregnant Runa. Guy, broken thumb held against his chest, braced the sagging door with his back. Marta found the hidden draft at the base of a food niche. "A hole here," she shouted. "Cord through it." Solveig fed a thin braided line into the upper vent. Yrsa caught it after 3 tries. They had not waited to become cargo. Skadi watched the line move and gave Scala an order in a clipped tongue. They understood only the root word beneath. Lower stair. She goes to cut below. Dalla heard the rest. He says collapse after departure. Distinct knowledge made a whole warning. Astrid could not leave the outer path without opening it to cutters. She made a choice I had not commanded. They, take Colin and the second smoke pot. Find the lower stair. Dalla remains hearing voice. You are guide, not prisoner at point. Do you accept? They looked at Scala, then at the passage beneath the hostages. Her sentence required route work, not battle pursuit. Guide and stop collapse. Half-wage still mine. Witnessed, Dalla called. They ran. Colin followed with crowbar and bandages. He was not a fighter, but he was the only person light enough besides Vey to crawl beneath a fallen hostage wall and keep someone alive there. Harm's maul caught my left thigh. The bronze corner tore wool and reopened the old cut from Rold's Island. My leg folded. He raised the head for a killing drop. I used storm strength. One brief surge, not hammercast. Thunder entered chest, back, and left arm. I caught the descending maul shaft with both hands despite the scream from my right shoulder. Force stopped iron a finger above my brow. The floor cracked under my knee. Thor's power did not last. I spent the breath shoving sideways rather than contesting a dead giant of a man. The maul head struck the threshold edge and stuck between stones. I kicked a wooden wedge into the crack with my heel. Harm pulled. The wedge held for 1 heartbeat, then 2. Hold the count. Dalla shouted to the outer path. Champion pinned at threshold. Hostages still above. From the vents Yrsa answered with a number. 11. Still 11. I wrapped Solveig's drag loop around the shaft and rolled away as the storm left me. Heat flooded my chest. My heart stumbled. Both shoulders trembled. Thirst turned my tongue to leather. The activation had bought position, not victory. Colin's voice, thin through stone, yelled for clean cloth he did not yet know he would need on himself. Ingrid stepped on the free rope because Harm's next pull would have struck Dalla. That was lawful defense of the witness. The champion tore the line through her boot sole and ripped the maul loose. He remained dangerous. The smoke revealed another thing. Each time Harm crossed the court center, the stream around his breast ring kinked. The pale line did not pass through him like a chain through flesh. It slid into a bronze tube behind the plate and continued under the floor. He was harnessed to a moving loop. I did not need rune sight. Tovi's rope cradle on the prow had taught me how a load could change direction through a ring. Solveig's purchase had taught all of us that pulling straight was sometimes the fool's work. His chain runs, not anchors, I shouted. Find the returning end. Old Finn answered from the hostage chamber. He had sounded a hollow stone below Marta's niche. Asa Littletooth crawled under the bench and found a cord wrapped around a bone wheel. It was not pale chain there. It was ordinary green rope attached to enchanted links beyond the wall. Skadi had joined stolen magic to practical craft because practical craft could be repaired by mortal hands. It could also be jammed by them. Asa took a clay food peg and drove it between wheel and floor. She struck with Marta's salt cup. The wheel stopped. Harm lurched in the middle of a swing. For the first time, the pale chain failed to give him the next step. Again. I yelled. The girl drove the peg deeper. Harm turned toward the hostage wall. Skadi commanded him to kill the person at the wheel. Old Finn and Guy braced the wall from inside. Runa of the Reeds dragged feverish Ollie clear. Canute and Orn used their shoulder bonds together to catch a falling roof brace. Asa's peg held the wheel while Marta's salt cup cracked against it again. The champion struck the wall. Stone opened. Through the gap I saw all 11 alive. Then the lower passage boomed. They and Colin had found Scala. They reached the lower stair by reading chips no surface I would value. One edge held fresh pale dust, another had been worn dark by old feet. Scala had taken the fresh cut because Skadi's people had opened it. They took the old drain and arrived below her. I learned that later from both Faye and Colin. During the fight, I knew only smoke changing direction and 3 hard blows beneath my feet. Scala stood at a wooden winch connected to the hostage floor. 2 cutters guarded her. A coastman held a torch over dry grave moss. If she pulled the release, the chamber would drop into an older pit. If she burned the moss, smoke would hide the lower route while Skadi escaped. They did not challenge her former leader to prove purity. She threw the second clay pot at the torch. Wet smoke and hot oil burst between them. Colin used the confusion to crawl behind the winch and drive his crowbar through its spokes. One cutter stabbed him below the ribs. His leather herb roll turned part of the point. The blade still entered flesh. Colin stayed on the bar, holding the winch while blood filled his belt. They could have chased Scala. Instead she struck the cutter attacking Colin with a loose wheel pin, dragged the healer behind the winch housing, and shouted for help through the air shaft. Scala cut the release rope. The crowbar bent. The hostage floor dropped a handspan and stopped against Colin's iron. Above, all 11 screamed. None fell. They used MYRK road law Scala understood. A guide who knowingly drops travelers beneath accepted passage is named pit breaker. No hall owes her shelter. Scala answered that surface hostages were not travelers. Then neither were we when you sold our tunnel maps to Skadi, they said. One of the 2 cutters lowered his weapon. He had family under Stone Womb. Skadi's route would pass there. They told him what she had learned at Gullhaven, 10 chain sites, buyers claiming reinforcement, broken rings instead. She could not prove every claim in smoke. She could point to the winch Scala had ordered cut after a court-accepted living passage. The cutter chose. He seized the severed rope and wound it around his arms, using his own body as the missing brake. The second cutter attacked him. Colin, wounded and unarmed, kicked the man's knee from behind the housing. They struck the knife away. She did not kill the fallen fighter. She took his belt and tied him to the winch frame. Scala fled down the fresh passage with 1 coastman and the second cutter after he tore free of Faye's belt. They did not pursue. She and the defecting cutter held the rope while Colin showed them where his blood was coming from. The floor stayed up. Above, the chamber settled. Harm pulled against the jammed bone wheel. His chest harness locked halfway through a turn. The maul carried forward while his body stopped. Dead wrists did not release, so the weapon twisted him off balance. I drove my light hammer under the bronze tube, not into his spine pin. Might gave the pry more force, but the tube held. Ingrid threw me the short crowbar she had carried for doors. I caught it badly, recovered, and seated its flat end beneath the plate. Harm headbutted me. Ash filled my mouth. I went down. He planted 1 foot on my wounded thigh and leaned until old blood ran warm into my boot. The saga offered no answer. Thor's burst had ended. Another activation while my heart fluttered and shoulders shook risked collapse. Hammer cast required a practiced thrown weapon and an arm Colin had forbidden. Rune Sight had already wasted 1 memory on a decoy and could be countered by the smoke, Micah, hidden return, and anti-rune work around us. I kept both gifts shut. Dalla stood in reach of the maul and called the law instead of running. The chain claimant attacked during hearing. The champion attacks hostages through the wall. The condition remains witnessed, defeat releases all 11. The bronze-masked dead repeated the final phrase. Their voices came slowly, each fighting Skadi's compulsion. Skadi raised his staff. Pale links tightened around their wrists and throats. Court law is mine while I hold the seat. Old Finn answered through broken stone. A seat held by strangling witnesses is occupation, not judgment. Marta named Skardi's knife men. Hild named the night taken. Torvald named his brother sent to Gullhaven. Canute and Orn named the winch beneath them. Yersa named Scala's order to drop the floor. Runa of the Reeds named the pressure that had choked her when Skardi tapped his staff. Asa Littletooth held up the jam peg she had driven. 11 hostages became 11 witnesses against the claim. Earl Sten finally drew his sword. He did not attack me. He cut one pale link where it crossed the court seat. The sword edge broke. The link remained. The act still mattered. Skardi turned on him with naked anger. I saved you from the wreck, Skardi said. You saved an earl, Sten answered. Do not mistake that for buying a butcher. He kicked the broken blade through the hostage wall gap. He caught it in his sound hand and sawed the rope around Hild's wrists. Skardi struck Sten with the ash staff. Sten fell beside the seat, blood opening at his temple. No sudden redemption erased his earlier choice to stand there. No betrayal label erased this choice either. The dead court saw a lord oppose the chain claimant. Dalla saw the old hearing shift. She asked the bronze mask who appointed Ash Court before Skardi came. Named households, he answered through clenched dead teeth. And who may remove a keeper who destroys witnesses? The answer took effort. Pale chain cut into his throat. Named households. Sailors' villagers entered the outer chamber carrying the empty litters. They had not waited in safety after hearing the floor drop. Each named a household and repeated consent to challenge Skardi's keeper. Edda came last, salt in her remaining hand. I kept this mouth before he cut my ear, she said. I named the pale chain foreign to our bargain. I do not name every dead soul guilty for the hand around it. The bronze-masked keeper pulled his spear from the floor and drove its butt against the court seat. 2 dead sentries joined. The physical stone cracked around the pale link, but magic held. Harm turned away from me toward them. The chain commanded defense of its anchor. That movement lifted his foot from my thigh. Astrid shouted, "Formation now." A company could not strike my champion without voiding the individual challenge, but they could protect witnesses from Scala's returning cutters. Ingrid took center. Ingel descended from the high path. Astrid braced her shield left-handed at the narrow door. Villagers passed the litters rearward. Solvik hauled Yersa's cord. The 11 began cutting one another free with Sten's broken sword. Harm had to cross the split threshold to reach the court seat. His moving chain ran through the jammed wheel. His maul head was wider than the passage. Practical limits remained even for the dead. I rose on one good leg and gave him the lane he wanted. He charged. Harm charged because the chain commanded it, because the court seat stood behind me, and perhaps because some surviving piece of the first keeper still knew that a keeper defended his hall. I could not decide which reason mattered while his maul filled the passage. The head struck both door edges. Old Iron screamed. The shaft drove forward between them, but the stone robbed the swing of its killing arc. Harm kept coming, shoulders crushing through the gap. His bronze chest plate scraped sparks. The tube beneath it stood exposed for half a breath. I set the crowbar under the tube and used the champion's weight rather than another god. Now, I told the jammed wheel, the rope, and anyone still breathing who could haul. From below, the defecting cutter's shout answered through stone. From the hostage gap, Asa hammered the peg once more. My wounded leg slipped. The bar began to turn out. Ingrid could not strike Harm without breaking the challenge, but she kicked a wooden wedge across the floor. I caught it with my heel, drove it beneath the crowbar, and made a crude fulcrum. Solvig's lessons lived in rope, Tovi's in load, Jarni's in allowing wood and iron to bear what flesh should not. Harm shoved. The bar rose. The bronze tube tore one rivet from his breastplate. He reached through the threshold and closed a dead hand around my throat. Fingers crushed breath. I hammered his wrist with my left fist and gained nothing. My right arm could not lift. Storm strength pressed like distant weather, available and lethal to repeat. I refused it. Inside the hostage room, Asa drove her peg until the bone will cracked. Canute and Orn hauled the return rope together. The defecting cutter below took their pull through his wrapped arms and screamed. They added her weight. Colin, bleeding, moved the bent crowbar one spoke farther and held. The moving loop reversed. Pale chain slid through Harm's chest harness backward. His hand tightened on my throat. Then his elbow bent against his will. The loop pulled him toward the hidden wheel while his body still drove forward. For one breath, Opposing forces pinned him in the threshold. Now is usually where you do something reckless, Astrid called. I smiled once. I released the crowbar. Harm lurched forward, expecting resistance. I dropped beneath his arm, caught the drag loop still tied around the maul shaft, and threw myself down the side stair. This was not hammercast. No thunder followed. My weight, his forward motion, and the rope changed the maul's direction. The iron head came free from the stones and swung behind him. It struck the bronze tube I had loosened. The tube split. Pale link spilled out through dead ribs, but they were not attached to Harm's spine or soul. They had run through a harness hidden under armor. The enchanted loop whipped across the chamber toward its wheel. One link caught Skardi's ash staff and tore it from his hand. Another wrapped the court seat. Harm remained standing. He turned toward me without the chain driving his limbs. Ash poured from his mouth. The maul hung in one hand. I had broken the control, not defeated the champion. He stepped over the ruined harness. No rune told me whether choice remained in him. The dead were persons with factions, memories, hungers, and bindings, not one answer. I raised my light hammer and asked the only question the challenge allowed. Do you yield the claim? Harm's jaw moved. Gravel fell. Court must hold. The households removed Skardi's keeping. Holding them breaks the court. He looked through the wall gap. 11 hostages were cutting the last bonds. Old Finn held Edda's salt bowl. Asa Littletooth still gripped the peg. Runa protected her belly with one hand and Ollie with the other. Their testimony faced him. Skardi reached for the loose chain. Kill him. Harm's head turned toward that living voice. He lifted them all. For an instant I thought he had chosen Skardi. Then he threw. The Gravehinge head crossed the court and smashed the ash staff where it lay. No storm strength carried it. A dead champion's practiced arm did. Pale marks burst from the wood and died against stone. Skardi recoiled. Sten seized his ankle from the floor. It was not enough to hold him, but enough to delay his reach for the staff's broken ring. Harm had abandoned Skardi's command. He had not abandoned the challenge. He came at me barehanded. Without the maul he was still larger, plated, tireless, and strong enough to crush my chest. I could not win by trading blows. I retreated toward the split court seat. The bronze-masked keeper understood before I spoke. He and 2 dead sentries planted spear shafts across the lower gap. Not weapons against Harm, but a barrier marking the boundary households had reclaimed. The champion rushed. I waited until his weight crossed the cracked edge. Speed helped my good foot move. Might helped my left shoulder strike. Neither guaranteed the stone would fail where smoke and spear blows had weakened it. It failed. Harm's right leg plunged through the court seat. He caught my belt and dragged me down with him. His free fist struck my ribs. Something cracked or shifted. I jammed the light hammer between his breastplate and the stone, preventing him from rising straight. He tore leather from my waist and reached again. Old Finn threw me Sten's broken sword. I did not stab the champion. I drove the snapped blade into the gap beside his bronze knee plate and twisted. Metal wedged against rock. Harm pulled until the plate bent. The court seat collapsed another handspan and trapped him from thigh to chest. He could still reach me. Dead fingers closed over my right forearm. Pain blackened the chamber. I put my boot against the ruined harness, gripped the loose pale chain with my left hand through a fold of cloak, and hauled it around both his wrists. Solvik caught the far end. So did Yrsa, limping out of the hostage room. Canute and Orn joined. Sailors' villagers passed the chain around the east stone. They did not wait for my order. Their hands made a purchase stronger than mine. Harm's arms drew down against the broken seat. I placed the hammer head at his throat, not because it could kill him, but because the accepted challenge recognized helplessness and yield. The court is held by its households, I said. Your weapon is gone. Skardi's command is broken. The witnesses are leaving. Continued attack cannot restore your claim. Yield. The dead champion strained once. The rope and chain held. He looked toward Edda. She poured salt into the crack around him. Rest from keeping until we name you freely again, she said. Harm opened his hands. Claim yielded. The bronze-masked dead struck spear butts in witness. Dalla repeated the judgment in Norse, Harbor Myrk, and the older court phrasing. They shouted it down the lower stair. 11 hostages answered. Harm's maul lay still. My hands would not stop shaking. Smoke, rope, wedges, household voices, and one short storm burst had brought us here. None of them alone would have held him. The burial pin still sat useless in dead bone. The saga began to burn as the second dawn reached the vents. The words appeared through blood, smoke, and a thirst no victory could remove. Worthy hostile champion defeated through direct participation, accepted mortal danger, allied action, and a witnessed surrender. Renown gained, 16. Before the challenge, Renown stood at 0 of 16 toward Saga level 4. Renown now 16 of 16. Saga level 4 reached. The measure choices appeared: might, speed, toughness. My throat was bruised. My ribs hurt with each breath. The old thigh cut had opened deeply. My right shoulder had been torn again. Thor's activation left tremor, heart strain, heat, and thirst. Toughness would not close any of it. It could gradually improve resistance to shock and steady recovery over minutes and hours if Colin stopped the blood and I drank. I chose toughness. Warmth spread slowly beneath the hurt, more foundation than relief. My breathing became less likely to vanish after each rib stab. The thigh continued bleeding. My shoulder stayed weak. The cut above my eye ran into it. I could not stand without the East Stone. Flesh, sleep, water, and another storm burst remained unpaid. Saga level 4 settled. Measures now stood: toughness, speed, might, toughness. Renown reset to 0 toward a later unnamed threshold. My 2 gift slots stayed occupied by the same storm and sight I already carried. Then the gods judged what the fight had meant. Thor favor gained, 1. Thor favor rose from 3 to 4, force used to shield witnesses, and a second burst refused when pride wanted it. Odin favor gained, 2. Odin favor rose from 1 to 3, costly recognition of a false binding, direct sight of Skadi's moving enchantment, and root knowledge taken from testimony rather than pretended sight. He did not apologize for Hava's hands. A white-eyed raven landed on the broken court seat beside Harm. Nobody else saw the system, but everyone saw the bird. Its claws left black marks on pale chain. Odin's voice came without comfort. You looked where your enemy wanted. Learn to follow what you have truly seen. Raven Mark became available as a refinement of rune sight, not a third slot. Unlock cost, 2 Odin favor. 1 enchantment only, previously seen with my own eyes, not described by a witness. For a short span it could follow that same magical signature. Decoys, broken relation, anti-rune cover, changed work, and distance would end it. It could not find an unseen person, name a carrier, or red intent, guilt, history, root, or future. Activation would steal reliable depth and color from my left eye, bring nausea, and light me to anyone watching for rune use. Unlock cost a favor, a failed trace refunded nothing. Using rune sight later to seize a fresh signature would still risk memory. It follows the pale links I already saw on him, I told Dalla and Astrid. Not the man. Not a road he has not yet taken. Astrid snorted. A narrow bird. Buy it if it helps the 11 leave. I spent 2 Odin favor. Odin favor fell from 3 to 1. Raven Mark unlocked under Odin's occupied slot beside narrow focus. Hammer cast stayed under Thor. Still 2 gifts, rune sight and storm strength. Skadi had recovered his broken ring and was retreating through the north passage. I named the moving pale link enchantment I had seen on his arm and chest. Raven Mark activated once. A black feather crossed my left eye. Color drained from half the chamber. The floor tilted because depth became uncertain. Nausea rose. Across ordinary sight, a thin raven trail clung to the pale enchantment where it passed behind stone. It did not outline Skadi's body. It showed only the same moving work I had seen. North passage, I said. Short trace. Move hostages first. Information second. Skadi heard or sensed the activation. The pale line split into 3 at the passage fork. Decoys. Raven Mark followed all 3 for 6 breaths, unable to distinguish copied signatures. Then 2 went dead against mica curtains. Anti-rune cover. The remaining trace continued north, weak but coherent, toward the headland road. The refinement had demonstrated its counter immediately. It had not solved pursuit. We followed only far enough to obtain defensible evidence without leaving the 11. They emerged from below supporting Colin. Blood soaked his tunic. Astrid abandoned the north passage and went to the healer without waiting for me. That was the correct command. All 11 out, she said. Then roots. Odin's raven clicked its beak as if disappointed. I liked Astrid more for that. The challenge judgment barred any further claim until every hostage had departed alive. We made law physical. Hild and Marta could walk. Canute and On carried the first litter between them despite rope burns. Guy held his broken thumb against his chest and took the rear of the second litter with a villager. Old Finn used his boundary staff and refused a carrier until the steep path. Runa of the Reeds moved slowly between Ingrid and Sailor. Asa Littletooth carried the salt bowl and the jam peg as evidence. Torvald supported feverish Ollie. Yrsa limped beside Solvig with one arm over her sister's shoulders. 11 entered our count, 11 had to reach open sky, then the reed boat, then Stormbreaker's deck. Colin became a 12th rescue without becoming one of the promised 11. His stab had missed the belly by the width of his herb roll but cut muscle below the ribs. He told Astrid how to pack it while graying around the mouth. She obeyed his instructions exactly and ignored his attempt to stand. Vay's defecting cutter named himself Core. He had bound the cut release around both arms until skin tore. He did not ask to join us. Dalla carried his testimony. Skadi had bought Scala's faction with iron and passage guarantees, promising to protect Stonewomb after he opened the sea roads. Core believed him until the hostage floor was ordered dropped. Belief did not erase his armed part. His choice at the winch did not erase it either. Astrid offered him the same immediate terms she had offered boarders at Gullhaven: drop iron, submit to front bonds suitable to wounds, receive treatment, and get a hearing. Core accepted. Vay asked to remain his guide through surrender words but not his advocate. Dalla interpreted both without becoming either. The 2 dead sentries who had resisted Skadi remained upright. Edda addressed them by household names. They withdrew into wall niches voluntarily. Others could not. When the pale chain broke from the court seat, 3 collapsed into ash and old cloth. We had not killed them by pulling pins. Their compelled motion had depended on Skadi's foreign binding. Its removal ended that motion. Harm stayed trapped but aware, no longer hostile. The households promised to reopen his seat only after a new hearing. Defeat did not require execution. Skadi's route mattered, but the hostage's breath came first. Raven Mark tugged north across my damaged vision. Each heartbeat spent carrying someone weakened it. That was the limit we had accepted. At the outer fork, Scala attacked one last time. She had doubled back through the false tunnel and reached the goat path above us with 2 coast bowmen and the cutter who fled the winch. She rolled stones toward the litters. The enemy initiated again. Ingel saw the first stone move. He did not shoot at a Myrk face. He slung at the wooden lever under the rock. The stone dropped early and wedged across the path instead of crushing Runa. It also blocked our exit. Astrid formed the passage defense around people, not me. Ingrid held uphill center. Astrid stood behind with left-handed spear. Solvig and Yrsa cut litter poles shorter to turn them through the side gap. They pointed to a drainage crack broad enough for Asa and Ollie. Dalla translated Scala's shouted demand for Core and then translated Core's refusal without softening either. The winch-fleeing cutter came down the goat path on Scala's left, knife first, aiming for Core's bound wrists. Injal's next stone cracked the man's elbow, the knife spun into fern. Ingrid advanced 1 shield length on Astrid's count and slammed him into the wedged rock. He stayed down long enough for Solvig to loop his ankles, then tore the loop with a second knife drawn left-handed and staggered after Scala rather than yield. Scala loosed at Vay. Core stepped into the line with front-bound hands. The arrow entered his upper arm rather than Vay's throat. Blood and choice, his alone. Edda and Old Finn used their staffs to roll the wedged stone downhill after the last litter cleared. The rock tore away Scala's footing. She jumped before it took her and vanished into the false tunnel with 1 bowman and the limping winch cutter. The other bowman surrendered when his bow broke against Ingrid's rim. We did not take Scala. The path stayed open. Extraction continued without a second saga purse. The Raven Mark trail crossed the headland crest while we worked around the stone. Then it stopped hard at a hanging screen of black wool sewn with mica and bone slivers. Beyond the screen 3 roads diverged: North Beach, Ashwoods, Shallow Cave. Color leaked back into my left eye with a headache. The short mark was finished. They went to the dirt. Boots inland and barefoot returns. A drag chain on the beach that lifted clean. Cave hooves, cut from wood and tied to human feet. She spat once and followed the stake holes that still smelled of horse. Dalla split Core and the surrendered bowman. Core had heard Skadi order, North Stair, Salt Road, Split Harbor. The bowman had packed fodder for 6 horses beyond the ash woods. Sailor's Burn Boy had watched riders come from a north inlet. Edda named the ridge path to Crowhook from household memory, not from any bird in my eye. At Crowhook the ground agreed, fresh dung, 6 stake holes, boat drag, and 1 pale link burn on standing stone. Scardy's party had taken the Salt Road to the North Inlet. From there a shallow vessel could beat a deep ship to Split Harbor. His goal sat in words spoken before witnesses and in what his people left behind. Open the chain road under Split Harbor. Seize the sea gate. Wake drowned crews beyond it. The court had delayed us while he moved the Broken Ring Key north. Buyers already called the force a corpse fleet. Name, Scardy Chaintaker. Route, Ash Ridge Salt Road to Crow Hook, then coastal water. Aim, fit the Broken Ring, raise or release bound drowned crews under coerced command. Enough to chase. Not enough to bless every story he had told about gods and my rent. By midday, every hostage had reached open sky. Asa still clutched the jam peg. Old Finn would not sit until he had named each person twice under open light. Runa drank from Sailor's cup in small swallows while Ingrid watched her color. Guy laughed once when the wind hit his face, then bit it off as if joy might be taxed. We signaled 2 lanterns in daylight with polished shield flashes instead of flame. Stormbreaker answered from beyond the reeds. Johnny's answering flash came crooked, then steadied, his 3-fingered hand finding the old code. Read boat first for Fever and Child, Astrid ordered. No one argues rank into the water. Torvald tried to give his place to Marta. Marta shoved him toward the first load anyway. You run messages. Run this one to a living deck. Scala's remaining skiff moved to intercept the boats. Leaf saw the skiff before our first litter touched water. He could have brought Stormbreaker into the Reed Creek and risked the repaired strakes. He did not. He kept deep water, shortened sail as Tovi required, and launched our second small boat with Johnny, Orm, and Bearer aboard. Orm should not have fought, so he carried a coiled towline and nothing sharper than a boat hook. Bearer carried water and made that look like a threat. The hostile skiff rode between shore and ship. 5 cutters remained aboard, with shields against sling stones. Their goal was not a people's war. They were Scala's chosen remnant trying to recover core, silence witnesses, and delay us. Astrid divided the crossing. Children and the fevered went first, Asa, Ollie, Hild, Runa, and Colin, with Sailor and Ingrid. Runa objected to being grouped as fragile until Colin nearly fainted against her. She took his weight and said, very well. He is the child. The skiff accelerated. Injal climbed the lowest ash limb for a clear sling lane. Solvig tied our shore rope through 2 forks, giving the first boat a guided crossing rather than free water. They chose the launch gap by reading current in reeds. Dalla stayed where boat and shore could hear her, translating enemy offers and our surrender terms. I took the rear boat with Astrid, Yrsa, Finn, Marta, Torvald, Guy, Canute, Orn, Kor, and the captured bowman. Too many for 1 load. We would need 3 trips. They reach us on the second, Johnny called. Not if the wake hits first, Leaf answered, already measuring the skiff's stroke against our sail edge. He changed that count. He turned Stormbreaker's bow away as if abandoning us. The enemy steersman shouted and drove harder for the loaded rescue boat. Then Leaf let the eastern wind fill half the sail and came around the skiff's stern. He could not ram without risking our repaired prow. He crossed their wake close enough that Stormbreaker's larger hull threw a steep wave across the light craft. 2 enemy rowers lost blades. The skiff rolled. Johnny took the towline from Orm and led it around his steering bench. Solvig hauled from shore. Their tension pulled the first rescue boat through the skiff's broken rhythm. A cutter threw a spear at Runa. Ingrid caught it on the split edge of her shield. The point passed through and cut her upper arm. She did not drop the shield until the boat scraped Stormbreaker's side. Bera climbed the rail before anyone could help her and poured water into Colin rather than celebrate. Tovi took Runa's hand, checked how the hull settled under new weight, and ordered everyone aft by pairs. The carpenter's authority prevented rescue from swamping the thing rescuing us. The second trip carried Yrsa, Finn, Marta, Torvald, and Guy with Astrid and Solvig. Scala's skiff recovered 3 oars. Injal's stone struck 1 blade at the grip. Orm hooked floating reeds across another. The enemy cut free and loosed arrows at shore. Dalla could have boarded the second boat. She stayed to interpret Kor's warning that Scala's people would use a submerged line. They found it by walking knee-deep along the bank and feeling with the blunt end of a spear. The green rope ran from a buried stake to the skiff's bow, ready to trip our boat when they pulled. Solvig saw the tension change from midstream. She did not cut the guide rope. She sent a loop down it, caught the submerged line, and drew both together. When the cutters hauled, their own rope tightened around the ashroot fork. The skiff's bow jerked sideways. Leaf used the opening to place Stormbreaker between them and the rescue boat. No ram. No thunder. Hull and steering denied the attack. Hold water. Toby shouted as bodies climbed. One pair at a time or I open a seam myself. Bera shoved a skin into Hild's hands before Hild could ask for a weapon. Drink. Then sit where the carpenter points. Astrid offered surrender across the water. Dalla carried it in both tongues so no man could claim he had not heard. Drop iron. Keep breath. Hearing after the deck is safe. Swim away if you prefer the shore and Scala's mercy. 3 cutters dropped weapons. 2 jumped and swam for the north shore. Harbor law did not reach this coast automatically, but Edda and the household witnesses accepted temporary bonds and a hearing after safety. We did not shoot swimmers in the back. Scala was not among them. The third crossing carried Canute, Orn, Kor, the captured bowman, they, Dalla, Ingel, and me. That made every named hostage aboard before the second sunset: Yrsa, Hild, Ollie, Marta, Canute, Orn, Finn, Runa of the Reeds, Guy, Asa Littletooth, and Torvald. 11 entered, 11 left alive. No one had been taught to stay dead. Colin counted them himself while lying beside the mast. Bera made him repeat 11, then counted again. Toby checked weight and ordered 1 water barrel shifted forward. Jani assigned villagers to sit low. Leaf kept sail reduced. Orm remained conscious away from the prow hum, though his scalp bled through 1 rap. Prow brace sings, Toby said. Not a crack. A complaint. Keep bodies aft of the mast until I say otherwise. Solvik sat Yrsa on a coil and unwrapped the ankle with hands that shook only after the knot gave. You took my good indigo, she muttered. I will dye you a worse color if you die now. Yrsa managed a cracked smile. Collect the debt in harbor. Ingel brought the surrendered bowman a cup before anyone asked. The man stared at it as if water might be a trick. Dalla said, plain, drink. Hearing comes after breath. Practical ship work finished the rescue. Their condition was not clean. Ollie's fever rose. Runa had cramps but no bleeding. Finn's feet were torn. Guy's thumb remained broken. Yrsa's ankle swelled. Hild and Marta had smoke cough. Canute and Orn had deep rope burns. Asa's wrists were scraped. Torvald had a cut at the mouth. All were alive and defensively stable under Colin's direction. Ingrid's arm needed stitches. Kor had an arrow through flesh above the upper arm bone. Colin's side wound remained the most dangerous. My thigh, shoulder, ribs, throat, brow, tremor, thirst, and half-restored depth vision made me unfit for another champion. Stores paid the living cost. We opened 2 more water skins, leaving 9 full ship-used skins plus 3 partly used. The 4 barrels remained sound. Bera issued hard bread softened in water, dried fish broth, onions, honey, salt, herbs, and clean cloth. She reopened the tally stick where the Gullhaven 130-person days had begun. 2 full ship days already eaten, 13 mouths each, left about 100 for person days. Stormbreaker now carried 29 living people, the original 13 travelers, 11 rescued hostages, Kor, the captured bowman from the goat path, and 3 cutters taken from the skiff. At equal full ration that was a little under 4 days, near 3.5 if no net came up and no shore jar opened. I will not starve a prisoner to pretend we are richer, Bera said. She set the same bowl measure for fevered hostages, wounded fighters, Kor, the bowman, and the 3 surrenderers as for Leaf and me. Starting at the next meal every able body, including hers and mine, dropped to 3/4 portion so the wounded and the pregnant kept full cups. That stretched the 104-person days toward 4.5 shared days without cutting anyone off the board. Crow hook water if we can. Nets if we must. No quiet empty bowl under a thwart. Kor remained separate only for the arrow and the record of his charges, not for hunger. Vay's paid sentence had not vanished. Dalla's free status had not changed. The 12 willing travelers remained 12. 11 rescued hostages were passengers under protection, not new crew by gratitude. I counted using names twice. No one was missing. We did not flee Ash Barrow without closing the accepted judgment. Stormbreaker lay beyond bowshot while Edda, Dalla, Vay, Old Finn, Asa, and I returned only to the East Stone in the small boat. Astrid opposed my going until Edda pointed out that a challenge claimant absent from closure could leave the hostages' release disputed. Leaf proposed going in my place as family claimant. I refused because the demand and accepted risk had named me. Leadership did not mean lending consequences to the nearest Lord's son. We remained outside the mound. The visit took less than a quarter bell. Harm remained trapped at the broken seat with hands open. The bronze-masked keeper stood at the threshold. Behind him, the court's other dead had separated. 5 withdrew into niches. 2 asked Edda for household names they had forgotten. 3 had collapsed when Skardi's pale chain tore loose. None attacked. Old Finn gave testimony for all 11. Edda gave the household's removal of Skardi's keeping. Asa presented the clay peg and described the false binding, bone wheel, and floor release. They described the lower passage, Scala's order, Kor's choice, and Skardi's escape route. Dalla interpreted and marked where she lacked an exact word. I testified that Harm yielded after his harness broke and that I claimed no ownership over him or the court. The bronze mask judged the condition met. All 11 named pledges had left the mound alive and boarded a living ship. Eirik Halvorsson's heat was not owed. No replacement hostage could be taken under the same claim. The dead court withdrew its demand. Edda cut the judgment into ash with a nail while Dalla spoke each clause twice, once for the dead and once for the living ears on the path. Old Finn pressed his thumb into the soft mark beside his name as if sealing a field boundary. Asa set the clay peg on the salt rim and left it there. If another man comes with a pale staff, Edda told the keeper, you send for households before you send for blood. If households come, the keeper answered, we will hear before we bind. The release stood in law as well as motion. Edda then asked Harm whether he would return to keeping when freed from stone. Not under pale chain, he said. Under named households. The dead champion looked toward the empty hostage room. If they may remove me. Old Finn answered, they may. They had built a limit stronger than Skardi's control in 6 words. We used levers to raise the broken seat enough for Harm to pull free. I did not command him. He retrieved no more. He carried the shattered bronze harness to the threshold and laid it beside Edda's salt. Plain eyes could see tool marks beneath the enchantment burns, green cord wear, MYRK bronze tubing, coast-made rivets, and pale link sockets. Several workshops had sold pieces into one chosen machine. Harm gave us one more testimony. While bound, he heard Skardi speak to Sten. Skardi's north vessel waited at Crow Hook. Its next call was Split Harbor. He intended to reach the sea gate before Stormbreaker, fit the broken ring into a chain lock below the western tower, and call drowned crews from a sealed road. He needed Sten alive because Sten's name could persuade harbor guards to open the first gate without siege. He needed Leif if Sten failed. That explained the coming danger without revealing intent or future as certainty. It matched Kor, the bowman, the horses, tracks, root burn, and Skardi's own words. Where is Sten? I asked. The bronze keeper pointed to blood on the north passage. Sten had risen after Skardi fled. He refused Edda's call to remain for judgment and followed north alone, carrying no sword. Whether he pursued, returned to Ally, or sought Leif was unknown. The Raven trace was already spent. Sten was a man on a road, not the pale work I had marked. I did not pretend otherwise. Odin's raven remained on the ash tree. The bird offered no second mark, no prophecy, and no favor. Freyja's voice did not return. Thor's heat had left only ache. Gods had touched the event, people had resolved it. We left the court with a copy of judgment cut into 2 ash tablets. Edda kept one. Dalla carried the other. They drew the Salt Road route beside the tablet and stopped her hand before any law mark. Back aboard, Solvig sat with Yrsa and cried without hiding her face. Leif heard Sailor's testimony about Sten, then mine, then Dalla's, then the ash tablet. He did not ask whether his father was good or guilty. He asked what Sten had done in order. Saved by Skardi after the wreck. Traveled beside him unbound. Asked help recovering son and command. Objected to hostages. Failed to stop their taking. Stood with Skardi at court. Cut the pale link. Was struck. Followed north after Skardi escaped. Contradiction remained contradiction. We would not send it into a verdict for Leif's comfort or mine. Leif held his father's seal. If he reaches Split Harbor first, guards may open for him. Yes. If he comes here. We hear his claim under the share law you helped write. He looked at the crowded deck, the 11 freed people, and Sten's family block recorded in the chest. He will call that theft. Then he can bring testimony. Leif almost smiled. It failed halfway. We turned north before the second sunset. All 11 hostages breathed salt air on deck. Skardi's name, root, and goal sat in the ash tablet and in every mouth that had heard them. A grey cloth rose on the north shore. Truce. The lone boat came from behind the headland with one rower and one passenger. Truce cloth, Johnny said. Or a sail cut small to look like one. Grey is grey, Dalla answered. Law is what we do when it reaches the rail. Earl Sten held the grey cloth himself. He had washed blood from his temple but not changed the pale-patched cloak. No Skadi chain marked him. No weapon showed. His rower was a coast fisher we did not know, frightened enough to miss every third stroke. Sten sat straight despite the wound. Salt had dried white in the seams of his boots. He looked like a man who had walked more than he had ridden, and argued more than he had rested. Astrid ordered bows down but ready. Ingrid could no longer hold a shield after the arrow cut, so Ingel took the rail. Leif kept the steering oar. Johnny shortened sail. Tovi watched the loaded hull. Bera moved the sealed Mercy skin away from the meeting side. Colin was too wounded to stand and still demanded the right to judge whether any visitor carried fever. Dalla agreed to interpret if needed but would not turn father and son into her dispute. They identified no route trick in the approach. Scala still held shore ground. Skadi still ran for tide. My two slots stayed as they were. Sten would have to speak for himself. Leif's chain scar showed white around his throat. He sees me first, he said. That was not a command inherited from Sten. It was a son's request and the steering master's judgment about a truce boat. I accepted. We brought the boat alongside without letting Sten board. Solvig ran the line. Astrid placed the Ash judgment tablet where he could see it. 11 former hostages stood or sat in view: Yrsa, Hild, Ollie, Marta, Canute, Orn, Finn, Runa, Guy, Asa, and Torvald. Their survival was not an argument we needed to decorate. Sten found Leif at the steering oar. For one heartbeat rank left both faces. A father saw the chain wound on his son. A son saw the cut on his father. Leif took one step toward the rail, then remembered the ship between them. You lived, he said. I came back. Not the same thing. Sten absorbed that. His gaze moved over fresh oak, stitched sail, grey company strip, bronze cleansing plate, and Nidhogg prow. He saw Bjarni at bosun's place, Bera at stores, Astrid commanding fighters, and me standing because sitting might show how close I was to falling. This is Rold's ship, he said. Leif answered, Stormbreaker. You renamed another man's prize? We cleansed, repaired, provisioned, and divided a captured vessel under Gullhaven law. Your household holds 25 accounting shares. 5 may answer the spring provision loan if lawful income does not. You do not own labor aboard. Sten looked as if Skadi's staff had struck him again. I did not enjoy it. Leif's dignity mattered more than my victory in the exchange. Sten asked to board under truce. Astrid refused because our deck held wounded hostages and prisoners, and because his relation to Skadi remained unresolved. Leif offered hearing across the rail until a safe shore. Fair terms could feel like insult without becoming wrong. The Earl glanced at the ash tablet. Skadi is going to split harbor. We know, Leif said. He has 6 horses no longer and 1 shallow ship. He will reach the outer gate before you if this hull carries half a village. From the mast, old Finn answered. The half village is listening. Sten inclined his head. He knew when a witness had teeth. He gave one useful fact without price. Skadi's vessel needed the evening tide at Crow Hook. Damage from a grounding had delayed it. Stormbreaker could beat him by taking the inside reef lane, but only a steering master familiar with Sten's old raid charts could keep a deep keel clear. Leif knew the charts. The clue could be true, bait, or both. Tovi and they began testing it from coast and hull evidence without being asked. Then Sten named why he had returned. I saved sailors from drowning before you were born, he told Leif. I paid for the voyage. My seal opened harbors. My silver repaired this ship. Men swore service to my house. Disaster does not end lawful command because a peasant reached shore first. The original ship broke, Leif said. The survivors swore new terms willingly. Under need. Need also held us when you hired them. The words hurt both of them. Sten looked at me. Skadi says the gods built you for a crown. I do not know whether he lies. I know what I see. My son at your steering oar. My silver in your hull. My fighters under your voyage. My family seal used to divide my authority while I bled in a stranger's camp. Astrid's company is under its own contract, I said. Leif steers by vote and skill. The shares are recorded. Bring a challenge to a public law rock. I bring one now. This rail is not a law rock. It was enough to declare me dead. No one declared you dead. The family block remained for exactly this return. That fact stopped him for a breath. Gullhaven law had preserved a place for the man now attacking it. Fairness had survived someone I disliked. He recovered with the force that once made seasoned raiders follow him west. Then hear the living Earl under truce, Sten said. The coast wind snapped the grey cloth. Behind him, the second sunset touched the water. Ahead, Skardi's delayed vessel waited for tide and Split Harbour's gate waited for a familiar seal. Sten pointed first to Leif. I demand the return of my son to my household. Leif's knuckles whitened on the steering grip, but he did not step back from the oar. Sten's hand shifted to Stormbreaker's repaired rail. I demand the ship purchased by my voyage and silver. Astrid's left hand rested on her spear. Ingrid, stitched and seated, still lifted her chin. Olfin's staff tapped once against a rib as if counting law stones. Then Sten looked across the grey company strip, the rescued witnesses, the divided owners, and every person who had chosen a place while he was gone. I demand command. No weapon rose. No answer settled the claim. 11 freed people watched from the crowded deck. The ash tablet named Skardi's Road. The next law still stood between father, son, and the rail. Leif held the steering oar between father and ship. Stormbreaker drifted under truce while the tide turned toward Split Harbour.